Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, one you love the most, Niall Heston, back with a brand new episode here on The Truth. Back once again with my boy AJ Ponciano. AJ, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great as well. Today we're going to be doing our Week 11 start, sit, sleepers, and busts. I do want to point out we are recording this on a Tuesday, so a lot can change from Tuesday to Saturday, but this is one of the only times that we were going to be able to collectively do it together, so we figured that we'd rather do it together and a little bit earlier, which most of the stuff will relatively stay the same. The only thing that may change is if there's people that are injured, people that get injured, or something like that, but it all should be relatively the same. Very informative and very thought out per se. So without further ado, we have our three starts, sit, sleepers, and busts each. So without further ado, AJ, go ahead and give me your three starts for this week.
First off, I'm going to go with George Pickens. George Pickens has been really good these last few games, especially for Russell Wilson coming back, becoming the starting quarterback. First week that he was with Russell Wilson, 5 catches, 111 yards, a touchdown. 2 weeks ago, because the Giants, 4 catches, 74 yards, and last week, 5 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown there. They're going to be in a divisional game this week against the Ravens, which is always just big. The entire division where they play each other, it's always great games. But the Ravens have the worst pass defense in the NFL right now. They've allowed 3,146 passing yards, 22 passing touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. They also have led a QB rate of 101.8, which is really good because I'm pretty sure the average QBR is like 85 is what it comes out to. I mean, they've been really bad on the defensive side. Pickens has been the number one option every game. Like, he's been getting targets. Outside one game, he scored a touchdown. 2 of the 3 games, he has over 90 yards. And the one game he just missed out on, he had 4 catches for 74. He's just been really good. He showed him being that he is the wide receiver one there. I know Mike Williams also had a touchdown last week, so he may be kind of a dark horse sleeper, but I really like George Pickens for this week. Next up, I'm going to go with Jared Goff against the Jaguars. Yeah, Jared Goff's not going to throw 5 picks again. 1 touchdown to 5 picks. We're not going to see that. I mean, he threw 4 picks coming into the last week's game before he threw those 5. He's going against a much worse pass defense in the Jaguars, who've allowed the 3rd most passing yards in the NFL right now, 2,345, 19 passing touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. I expect a bounce back game here. I think Goff is perfectly fine. It's just kind of one of those games, a big game there against the Texans. They did come out with the victory. Goff just didn't play well. I mean, he just didn't look good. It wasn't like it was just a tip ball here and there. It looked like he didn't know what he was doing out there. Like I said, going against a much worse Jags defense, who did play well last week against your Vikings defensively, but as a whole in the season, they have not been good all year. And then lastly, I'm going to go with Joe Mixon. And this may be an obvious one. You're probably starting Joe Mixon. But this could be like throwback to week 1 Joe Mixon is what I'm expecting for this week. Mixon has been really good so far these past few games coming back from injury. But I expect to take a step forward here. It's a Monday night game against the Cowboys. I mean, the Cowboys sucked last week. No surprise there. Losing Dak Prescott, you basically lose most of your offense. But defensively, they weren't good. On the defensive side, on the ground, they haven't been good either. They ranked 6th so far right now in rushing yards allowed at 1,369. One of the big things is 15 rushing touchdowns. I'm going to go on a limb and say that Mixon's going to score 2 to 3 touchdowns in this game and get you 125 to 150 rushing yards. I think it's very doable, especially in a game where I'm going to expect the Texans to play up in this game. They're going to be up in this game a good amount. I think that it could be a double-digit lead going into halftime. You know, that means running the ball, chewing clock. I think Joe Mixon has a huge game, like how he had back in week 1.
Yeah, so for me, my first of 3 starts is going to be Justin Herbert. I talked a lot about him last week, but Herbert's the real deal. I mean, this is Justin Herbert, 3 straight weeks of 19-plus performances. 19.7, 19.4, and then 24 3 weeks ago. So everything's been going good for Herbert, and I think that continues here. They are playing at home. This is their second of three at home against the Bengals on Sunday night, which typically doesn't draw in a lot of fantasy value and fantasy points unless it's the Lions and Texans, where there's a lot of interceptions involved. But these are typically low scoring games. I still think overall you're going to get productivity from Herbert regardless of the Sunday night football setting. For one, Justin Herbert's obviously a terrific passer. Two, he started to utilize his legs a little bit more, which kind of upped his fantasy value. And three, the Chargers offense and the Chargers team as a whole is completely rolling. Cincinnati, for the most part, has been doing that as well, but their defense has been stagnated at times, and their passing defense is not one of the best in the league. So I think this could be a perfect opportunity for Justin Herbert to really kind of make some strides in the right direction and really kind of emerge himself as a top quarterback choice going into this week, especially as a sleeper option. Secondly, I'm going to go with Cortland Sutton. I mentioned Cortland Sutton earlier as well. Cortland Sutton, again, had another good week that puts on 3 straight weeks for Cortland Sutton. 19 last week for 6 catches, 70 yards, and a score. The week before that, 23.28, 7 for 122. And the week before that, 17.1 with 8 catches and 100 yards. I think that continues as the Broncos offense has really started to make strides in the right direction. Bo Nix has been playing a lot better. And they were very, 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 very close to winning that game against the Chiefs on the road, which have been tremendous for them. Unfortunately for the Broncos, they weren't able to do so. But I did see a lot of progress in Cortland Sutton and his performance, as well as other guys that have stepped up to the plate as well. But the biggest thing that's helped Cortland Sutton game continue to rise is the well playing of Bo Nix. And I think that continues. Atlanta, at times is spotty. They're actually doing a lot better than I think I was maybe expecting them to do at this point in the season. Their defense, in my opinion, isn't that great all around. Run defense, pass defense, I think it's just kind of average. And really, their offense has kind of kept them in. And that's what you expect for an Atlanta Falcons team that has Kirk Cousins. They paid a lot of money to Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. But moving forward, this is a defense that could be continue to be manipulated. And Bo Nix played well the last couple of games. I think he continues to do so. I think Cortland Sutton's production continues to rise. And 3 straight weeks of 17 plus, you got to start him. And then finally, I'm going to go with Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren had the most carries of the season for himself last week at Washington, 14 carries for 66 yards. Also caught 2 passes for 29 yards. He's still looking to get over that 10-point fantasy threshold, but he's got a perfect opportunity to do so this week. Early indications of Najee's injury, I believe, is an ankle injury, if I'm not mistaken. It definitely is a lower body injury, and whether or not Najee is going to be playing, I think Jaylen Warren's production is going to continue to rise. This happened last year around this time when Jaylen Warren kind of started to rise through the ranks. And Jaylen Warren is one of those guys that's only rostered in 61.5% of leagues. I was listening to a podcast today about like it's handcuff season around Thanksgiving because these are when guys go down. These are when guys start to kind of differentiate themselves. So I think Jaylen Warren could be one of those guys. We feel like it's been a long time coming for Jaylen Warren to kind of consistently break out into the scene. A lot of indications are that this is his final year after the Steelers did not pick up his option. I think they're really going to continue to evaluate Jaylen Warren and see if this is their running back they want moving forward, or if they have to bring in another running back to replace Najee Harris and keep Jaylen Warren as a complimentary back. Regardless, his production this week against Baltimore, I think, will be pretty solid. Yeah, Baltimore's a good team. Don't get me wrong. It's a division opponent, but Russell Wilson's probably not going to be wanting to throw to that secondary too much. I think he's going to throw the ball to Jaylen Warren, and Jaylen Warren's rushing value is going to propel him into this matchup. Okay, what about sits?
First one, I'm going to go with Aaron Jones. I get that he was card off last week, but he is expected to play as of right now. He's day-to-day from what I've seen, but again, veteran player, they're not going to rush him back in practice. They'll let him rest these first couple of days and then go into later in the week once we get closer to see if he actually does play. I assume that he will, but I'm also going to sit him, not just for that reason, but going against the Titans, who've been solid all year. Their pass defense has been better than run defense. Run defense is still top 15 right now, allowing just over 1,000 yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. One of the big things, though, while I was looking at, the Titans' run defense has been really good, except for when they face two good running backs in the backfield. And right now, with the Vikings, they only have one good running back, and it's Aaron Jones. You're not going to tell me Ty Chandler or Cam Akers is going to be a dual threat back with him. But if you go to last week with the Chargers, yes, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards both had 50 yards on the ground apiece. But like I said, that still matches that play. That's their two complementary backs. Last time that they've done that, where they've allowed two backs to go over 50 yards, was against the Lions, where it's David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't expect them to do that. When there's one running back in that backfield that is the workhorse, they hold him under 50 yards. They hold him under 60 yards, and usually allow about a touchdown rushing, but usually it's to the quarterback. Seems like against the Patriots, it was Drake May who was the leading rusher there. James Cook had a touchdown, but had under 40 yards in that game. Jonathan Taylor, they were able to shut him down. Josh Jacobs wasn't the leading back last time they played. It was Malik Willis when he was starting. Dolphins didn't have much on the run there. Breece Hall was shut down when they played the Jets earlier this year. When it's a one running back team or one running back backfield, they shut them down for the most part. It's the two running back system. They have two good running backs they can flip back and forth but stay fresh. That's when they allow a lot of yards, and I don't expect that out of the Vikings. They don't have that dual threat going back and forth. Staying in the running back room, Audric Estime, he was picked up a good amount this past week. He had a career high in touches and yards last week against Kansas City with 14 rush attempts for 54 yards. He's just not going to have that type of game. Like I said, those are both career highs up to this point. I just don't expect it against the Falcons' run defense, who's been solid for most of this year. Granted, they have had their weak points where they've given up the big plays. They do have a good amount of yards, giving up almost 1,300, but only 5 rushing touchdowns. Plus, it's been a carousel of that running back room. It's going to be Javonte Williams, Estime, or McLaughlin. It's just whoever's the hot hand, that's who they ride. They don't really stick with one consistent back like I see with like the Saints or the Colts, where it's Jonathan Taylor and Alvin Kamara, and you're going to see them get 15 to 20 plus carries every single week. Lastly, I'm going to go with Najee Harris. Like you mentioned, the ankle injury, but also just being a divisional game, it's going to be tough for Najee going against the Ravens. Ravens have the second best run defense at only like 300 or 730 yards up to this point and 7 rushing touchdowns. He's been great. If he does play, and he will be limited with that ankle injury, Warren, like you said, had that season high in carries last week. I expect it to be a little more of a Warren game. And this is if not even if Najee plays, I think there's a chance that he gets maybe 10 carries for like 35 yards and like maybe a touchdown. I'm not 100% sure what he'll do, but one of the best run defenses is a divisional game. They're going to play to their strengths, and right now the strength for the Steelers has been the passing game with Russell Wilson, not as much on the ground with Najee.
Yeah, so for my 3 sits, the first one I'm going to have is Travis Etienne. Now, I feel like Travis Etienne's a guy that I've always just had a bad rap for. I feel like I've never supported Etienne, but it just really hasn't clicked for me for him and really wanting to actually use him moving forward. Against Minnesota last week in his first significant touches since his injury where he missed 2 games, he had 11 carries for 44 yards, that one catch for -1 yard, and equated to 5.3 fantasy points. The most fantasy points he's gotten in a week was in week 2, where he had 13 carries for 52 yards and a score for 14.8. He hasn't touched the ball more than 13 times in a game, at least rushing, and that's a bit concerning, especially with the fact that Trevor Lawrence has been out. Again, early indications of Lawrence's injury. I've seen reports that he could be out for the entire year. Some say he'll be back next week. Really hard to tell, but I wasn't hoping for this because I'm a Vikings fan, but I was really expecting the Jaguars to have more of a rushing attack. And now, granted, the Vikings had the ball for like 40 minutes of the 60 minutes, which is insane. And the fact that they, didn't have it more points than 12 because Sam Darnold threw like 3, red zone interceptions. But the whole point of that was they didn't have the ball a lot, and they were trailing at periods of time. And that's because, they weren't really having an efficient running attack. They were trusting Mac Jones to really throw the ball. And that's concerning. And I think that's even more concerning, in this matchup at Detroit. Mac Jones has got to find a way to get comfortable if he is the quarterback. Even if Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback, I haven't seen the production that I've really expected out of Etienne yet. So all in all, I think it's just a tough situation, tough matchup, and I wouldn't start him as much as I would, even to consider it. Secondly, I'm going to go with Jordan Love. Now, Jordan Love's had an up and down year. He had really good weeks 4 through 6. The rest couple of weeks have been a bit spotty. He's had an interception in every game that he's played. The most interceptions was against Minnesota, where he had 3, also had 4 touchdowns, but that was coming off a 2-game absence from that injury. He still has thrown an interception at least once a game, which is a bit concerning. And the overall play of the Packers is a little bit eye-opening going into this matchup in Chicago. It's a division matchup. It's at Chicago. They hate each other. This is usually a low-scoring affair, and I think that's going to be very much what this is going to be. And Jordan Love's value is strictly going to come from his passing yards. It's not going to come from his rushing value. So I think Chicago's secondary is going to do a better job of shutting down Jordan Love and the passing attack. On top of that, it's not like Jordan Love's the guy that gets tremendous rushing volume. He doesn't get any rushing volume, if that. So I definitely think that, moving forward, he's definitely one of those guys you definitely need to have an eye on. They do return home after the Chicago matchup for 2 games against the 49ers and Miami. So there is some optimism there. But for the most part, I would be a little bit curious to see kind of what happens moving forward and potential successes that Jordan Love could have. And then finally, I'm gonna go with Jawan Jennings. Jawan Jennings, I don't know, man. He just sometimes he's like the best player, and sometimes, in my opinion, he's just not, elite enough. And yeah, he's had his moments. He had 46 and a half points. We all remember that in week 3. Last week, he had 7 catches for 93 yards, 16.3 fantasy points. I just feel he's a little bit too inconsistent to consistently trust. Now, he's done a good job, especially when guys like Debo and Kittle are on the field, but I really just think looking forward in this matchup against Seattle, Brock Purdy's really just not going to target him as much as I really think people are expecting. And on top of that, the last time he played Seattle, he had 3 catches for 27 yards. I believe he did get injured in that game, but still, he wasn't really getting that target share that people were expecting him to, especially coming off a couple of good weeks. So they do play Seattle once again. It's one of those intriguing parts of playing in the division. You get to play each opponent twice. Yeah, I think it could be utilized efficiently. But moving forward, especially in this matchup, I'm shying away from it as much as I really think, can do justice. And I really think as time goes on, you're really going to struggle to, consistently have that battle of it. Do I start Jawan Jennings? Do I sit him just because you don't really know what you're going to get as far as overall production and consistency? Okay, what about sleepers?
First one, I'm gonna go to Jake Ferguson. I think that by the end of the game, it's gonna be Trey Lance in there. We saw a little bit of Trey Lance at the end of the game there, and what we've seen about with Trey Lance, especially in the preseason, is he just loves pushing the ball down the field. They love passing, and at this point, it seems like they don't care how many interceptions that he throws when he is out there, because it seems like he's gonna have big play with every interception that comes. And like I said, also in the Joe Mixon on the must start. I think this game's going to get out of hand pretty quickly. So that means Trey Lance potentially coming in a little bit quicker, pushing the ball down the field, having to throw a lot more. I think Ferguson being that safety blanket in the middle of the field is going to be big for him. Also for Cooper Rush. I mean, I know Jake Ferguson was the leading target last week, but 4 catches, I think like 41 yards or something along those lines. Uh, he was, like I said, he was the leading guy in receptions, second in targets, so they were trying to get him the ball. I just expect this game, like I said, get out of hand, pass a lot more than like how it was against the Eagles. I just think they're going to do it a little bit more efficiently, just because of how good the Eagles' pass defense really is. I'm actually going to stay in that game with John Mechie against the Cowboys. Mechie, these last couple of weeks, they've been trusting him a little bit more. With Nico being out potentially again, I think there's a chance that he does play this week. But Tank Dell be having on and off games that here and there. Stephon Diggs out for the season. Like I said, they've been trusting him a little bit more. Last 3 weeks, 6 targets, only 2 targets, but then 4 targets. But if you look at everything else, he hasn't had a target in 4 straight games before that, and then one back in week 1. Last week, 5 receptions, 74 yards, 1 touchdown. I mean, had a solid game there, and this is a deep sleeper. This is more of a sleeper that I was wanting to name drop John Mechie because I was really high on John Mechie. Even his rookie year when he was going to play, I was saying Dynasty League still go pick him up because I think that he's super talented. People are just overlooking him because of he's not going to have a clear cut role right away. Last up, I'm going to go with Jameson Williams. I know I just traded him to you, so I can't start him this week in my Dynasty League, but I think this is a great spot for Jameson Williams. I mean, he's going against the Jags defense, who's been bad all year, again, except for last week against your Vikings. But they're third in passing yards given up at 2,743, 19 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and this goes along the same lines of starting Jared Goff. I don't think Jared Goff's going to have 5 interceptions again. And Jameson Williams, he did have a good amount of targets in that game, especially early on. I was kind of surprised because him just being gone for so long, I was surprised that they were just going to target him like that not out of nowhere, but like I thought it was going to be more Amon Ra, the guys who have been there a little bit more. But finished the game, 3 receptions, 53 yards. Yeah, a lot of that was on those first couple of drives, and then all the interceptions started to come. And with that, I just think Jameson needs a big game back. And usually with the Lions, it seems like if they're going to have a bad game one week, it's going to be a complete bounce back. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a game that Jameson Williams has like 3 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown, just has one of those like 60, 70-yard bombs.
So for me, my first is going to be Will Levis, my Hall of Famer. Look, Will Levis had his best game of the season last week, as far as fantasy value is concerned. 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, which was the first time all season. 4 carries for 41 yards on the day for 19.1 fantasy points. I think he's a sleeper in the fact that Minnesota's defense is really good, obviously, but they are, sometimes prone to overall quarterback play, like just passing yards, rushing yards from the quarterbacks. They typically, are either really good or really bad. And I think Will Levis is going to ride some momentum going into this matchup against Minnesota. On top of that, this offense really needs to get clicking. I know Calvin Ridley got a garbage time touchdown last week, but there were some positives. I mean, first of all, for Will Levis, his completion percentage was there. He was throwing the ball accurately. He obviously wasn't turning the ball over. And I think most importantly for fantasy owners was the fact that he was starting to use his legs a little bit, which was part of the reason why he had so much success at Kentucky. I think this could be a sleeper matchup in the fact that it is Minnesota, and a lot of people are expecting him to kind of shut down once again against the Vikings. But I think this could be an opportunity to grow, especially coming off one game. They always say, like, they're stack those wins, right? Stack the wins here. I think this could be an opportunity where he has 2 or 3 good games before maybe hitting the road and going into some struggles with Houston and Washington. Secondly, I'm going to go with Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce, again, really hit or miss this year. He's really a deep ball threat, has kind of shown that this season. Really good games, really bad games. Last week, 4 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown. Joe Flacco has consistently looked to him, especially in that matchup there against Buffalo. And assuming that Joe Flacco is their quarterback, the only reason why I say that is because I saw some reports that they might consider putting Richardson back in either at their bye week or relatively soon, just because obviously with Joe Flacco, it's not really working. He's kind of like a Jameis Winston in the fact that he throws the ball all over the place, and throws the ball deep, which either is a home run or an interception. So I think there is potential for Anthony Richardson to come back and start relatively soon. I believe they have a week 14 bye week. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that there is some debate about whether or not he'll come back from the bye week, or even before that for that matter, which it could interrupt his volume, although he has relatively looked to Alec Pierce in the past. I think, again, a deep sleeper opportunity, especially going against the Jets, a team that's been struggling as well, especially defending the pass. And then finally, my final sleeper is going to be Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards returned from his 4-game absence last week, 10 carries, 55 yards, only 5.5 fantasy points, but I think he could be a deep sleeper again against Cincinnati when I think there's a good opportunity for the offenses to have success as a whole. J.K. Dobbins has a little bit of an injury, he's a little bit banged up, but he should be still good to go regardless. I think they're going to alleviate some of the pressure off Dobbins and focus on some of the other running backs they have, like Gus Edwards or Kamani Vidal, some of these other running backs, just because they want to, ease J.K. Dobbins as far as his workload is concerned, because let's think, it's been a while since J.K. Dobbins has reached this point of an NFL season. I think Gus Edwards could be a sleeper candidate to get his first touchdown of the year, again, against that Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday night. All right, what about Bus?
First one, I'm going to go Drake London. Drake London, I kind of just realized this. It's been interesting. He's only really had good games against divisional opponents. One of the other things that goes with that, he's in divisional games, that's the only time he's been targeted 10 plus times. Every other single game outside of the division, the highest target rate that he's had was against Kansas City with 9. Outside of that, 2, 6, 8, 7, and 3. When you go to divisional opponents, 12, 13, 11, or 10, and 12. In those games, 97 yards against the Saints the first time, or the second time just last week, 64 the first time, 154 against Tampa Bay and a touchdown, and then 74 and a touchdown against Carolina. Outside of that, he just hasn't been the best wide receiver. I mean, he hasn't been the number one option outside of those divisional games. I get divisional games come down to going to your guys, getting the yards that you need, trusting a little bit more. But on top of that, him not being as good against non-divisional teams, he's going up against the Broncos and Pat Surtain. The Broncos have been middle of the pack this year, allowing just over 2,100 yards through the air, 12 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. But I said, Pat Surtain's going to be on him. Pat Surtain, if you look at his numbers this year, you're like, oh, how is he good? He only has like 2 interceptions. One was a pick 6 and like 8 pass deflections or 6 pass deflections. And because they're not throwing his way. They know that he's the best cornerback in the NFL, so they just don't target whoever's on him. And I think that's what it's going to be of Drake London. I think Drake London finished the game with like 4 targets, maybe 2, 3 receptions for like 20, 30 yards. I still expect a big game out of Drake London because of the matchup, because of how the numbers have looked, where he just hasn't been that good against non-divisional opponents. Next up, JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, going against the 49ers, another divisional game here. This is a game that I expect DK Metcalf to come back from. I think he's been out for 2 weeks with that knee injury at this point, and he's expected to play this week. When JSN, these last couple of weeks, he's been great without DK Metcalf, but when Metcalf's on the field, it's very hit or miss if he's going to have a big game. He had a big game, I believe it was against either Carolina or the Giants. It was one of those teams. Where he had like over 100 yards and a touchdown with Metcalf in there. But usually he doesn't really have those big games. On top of that, it being a divisional game, the Niners have the fifth best pass defense only allowing 1,880 yards up to this point, 11 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. We know Geno Smith. Geno Smith is a 1 touchdown, 1 interception every week quarterback. He's going to throw for 250 yards, maybe 300 yards. And like I said, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Last time I remember Geno Smith playing against 49ers, I want to say it was maybe like the last game of last year. Maybe it was 2 years ago at this point, where he had like 3 interceptions to 1 touchdown for like 180 yards. He just didn't look good against the 49ers, and the 49ers are trying to bounce back. I believe right now they're sitting second in the division right behind the Cardinals. I think Cardinals are 2 games ahead, and they just got CMC back, and they're trying to turn it around. The divisional win is huge because I believe they're 1-2 in the division right now, which is again is on the bad side. I believe the Seahawks are 2-1 right now, and Cardinals are 2-0 or something like that, or 3-0 in the division. This is a big game for the 49ers if they want to turn their season around and make a playoff push. Because if you don't win the division, you have to go the hard way and get in the playoffs. They want the easiest way possible to be able to get into the playoffs this year. And last up, I'm gonna go with Tony Pollard going against your Vikings. Pollard, I've just I guess been a hater of. I mean, those guys that you don't like, Pollard's just been one of those guys for me. Uh, Going against the Vikings, he seems like he'll have big games here and there, and he gets all these carries in like garbage time. Like they're down by like 20, and they're still running the ball with him, or they're dumping it off for like 5 yard gains. He just finds ways to get those fantasy points. I just don't expect this week. Vikings have the best run defense in the NFL right now, only allowing 711 total yards on the ground, and only 4 rushing touchdowns, only giving up 3.8 yards per carry. One of the most impressive stats for me is they've only allowed 1 rush attempt over 40 yards and 2 rush attempts over 20 yards. They've been really good this year on the ground defensively, and I expect that keep going, especially in a game against the Titans, who, again, you said this may be one of those games that's a little bit closer. I don't think so. I think the Titans are really bad. But again, I've also said it just earlier that it seems like they always just had to like run the ball with him like 20 times, even though it's a loss. Even in those like final 2 drives where they just need to go down and score just to make the score look a little bit better, that they aren't getting blown out. They're still running the ball with Pollard. So I think he'll get the carries. I just don't think he'll have the production. The Vikings have proven to be really good on the defensive side on the ground, and I expect that to keep carrying over.
So my first bust is going to be Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Obviously, you know him pretty well with the Saints. Obviously, last week, 3 catches, 109 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I understand the Saints are banged up, but I think this is just a little bit spotty. It'd be different if you had like 6 catches for 109 and 2 touchdowns. You had 3 catches, though, and that concerns me a little bit. The biggest thing I always say with this, and you guys know what I say, is like you need to see it at least 2, sometimes 3 weeks in a row to consistently feel like you could trust him. Obviously, you know, if for some reason he does it again next week against Cleveland, you should very much consider rostering him if you haven't rostered him already and you have a spot open. Just because obviously if he has another good week, he's probably going to get a lot of ads. And it's going to be hard to, pick him up and start him. But then they're going into their bye week before having the Rams, Giants, Commanders, Packers, Raiders, and Buccaneers. So I think Marquez Valdez-Scantling obviously is a good option for Derek Carr in that win, but I don't think it's necessarily an option that can be sustained right now just because of everything that's going on and the fact that it's a little bit spotty. Secondly, I'm going to go with my guy, Jameis Winston, coming off a bye week in that same game against the Saints. Obviously, Jameis Winston had a bad game against the Chargers, 235 yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions to equate to 10.1 fantasy points. Looking at this matchup here for Jameis Winston in general, it's not one of the things I feel excited about. The only thing is the fact that it's a revenge game because he's going against the Saints in New Orleans, where he made his name. Of course not. Made his name in Tampa Bay. But maybe he has a little bit of motivation on his mind to have success and be a good quarterback. But again, similarly to MVS, I need to see a little bit more consistency from him. And I think the Saints defense will be a good challenge and a good test to see kind of where he's at moving forward. And then my final bust that I'm going to do is just in general the Cowboys quarterback. Again, we're recording this early in the week, so I'm not too sure who the Cowboys are going to be starting at quarterback here, whether it's Cooper Rush or Trey Lance. It's going to be a little bit interesting to kind of see how that transpires and how that matchup is for them. This week, it's an important week for them going at home against the Texans on Monday Night Football. I don't know. Obviously Cooper Rush didn't show me anything. Trey Lance at least showed me some rushing value, which I think could be, in consideration moving forward. But as far as the overall aspect of the game, I think you have a better chance if you have Trey Lance. But you might see a situation where it's like Malik Willis, where he gets a lot of rushing value because Trey Lance obviously is very fast, and he showed that in that game. But also on top of that, he can't throw the ball still. And Malik Willis was a similar way before getting traded over to Green Bay. And I just feel like there's so much talent with Trey Lance that there's opportunity for him, especially with it being his final year in Dallas. But yeah, I think if they do give him the shot, that's not even a hot take. It's my prediction for the week. But we'll see at the end of the week what happens. If Cooper Rush is, starting for the Cowboys, then I think you should run away from that as fast as you can. Thank you guys for listening to another episode here in The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter at @TheTruthAs1 to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. Are you looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration, raises your energy levels, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharp through focus and memory? Look no further than Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Bloodline Sports, AZ, and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity, while also maintaining an ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, one you love the most, Niall Hesson, joined once again by AJ Ponciano. Take care and good night.